is there anything that Eric Lyons actually understands? I mean, anything useful? Today, at the suggestion of a subscriber, we're going to take a look and find out that, no, sorry, he's not going to make anyone think that he has a brain in his head. Maybe there's an explanation for that, and we just might figure it out, but yeah, Eric Lyons is a dumbass, pure and simple. So let's go see why people like Eric are so utterly laughable, because it's really no surprise. So this is yet another requested video, this time done by subscriber My Bad, and that's good because usually I wouldn't be bothering with much from World Video Bible School. Eric Lyons, as I've said before, is such a complete dumbass that I really find it hard to stomach him for long. But for my fans, hey, I'll do just about anything, so here we go again. Eric is just going to prove, once again, that his faith is based on his own ignorance. And woodpeckers. You can't forget about the woodpeckers. So, with that in mind, away we go.
Did you know a woodpecker can strike a hard surface 20 times per second and several thousand times a day without ever getting hurt?
You know, that sounds like something that Eric here tried, and that might explain his evident brain damage. Yes, woodpeckers can do things like that because that's how they evolved. Eric here, yeah. I'm not sure what mutations came about to make him so utterly useless, but yeah, something seriously went wrong. Now, fair warning, I'm not going to be taking much that Eric says here seriously because, Eric Lyons and all, because we've proven time and time again that he just doesn't have the slightest clue what the hell he's talking about, well, anything, and he just doesn't care. Eric is a giant commercial for blatant ignorance on display. But we'll give him a chance, right? Because even a stopped clock is right once in a while.
And these aren't mere taps. They're not lackadaisical knocks on wood. These strikes, which repeatedly come to an abrupt halt, are equivalent to 1,000 times the force of gravity, or more than 250 times the force to which an astronaut is subjected in a rocket during liftoff.
So what? Now, let's get this out of the way right up front. Eric is going to say, well, I don't get it, therefore God. As though that actually proves anything. Because we actually understand how this stuff works, but Eric and people like him, he's got a destination in mind, and whether he can get there rationally or not, and he never even tries the rational part, he just doesn't care. He just needs that therefore God moment, no matter how much he makes a fool of himself in the process. Ignorance is a big part of religion. Anything that they can't attach an immediate solution to, it's got to be God's doing, right? God did it. God has to do everything. God fills all gaps, and even when we discovered down the road that God had nothing at all to do with it, well, by then, the religious have already stuffed this God nonsense into their heads, and they can't accept the real demonstrable explanation. We've known how woodpeckers worked for a very, very long time now. Eric just doesn't care. It gets in the way of his fifis after all.
I once saw my oldest son, when he was 7 years old, playing a game of kickball run full speed face first into a tree. Accidentally, of course. I cringed in pain for him. Why? Obviously, because he wasn't designed to take such a pounding with his head.
Yeah, I'm sure his head is just as empty as yours, Eric. But this is where we get back to Eric's leading assumptions. He figures that there has to be design because he desperately wants there to be design. Therefore, he can consider no other options. This is what happens when you start with a conclusion and then seek out anything you can find that can be pounded into that explanation. If you watch any irrational person anywhere, you get the same thing. Bigfoot enthusiasts can find evidence for Bigfoot in nearly anything, and so can flat earth proponents or alien abduction fanboys. Absolutely everything is part of the grand conspiracy that ends in their irrational blind faith. And Eric isn't any different. Everything is proof for his imaginary friend, even if it isn't, because he just doesn't care.
But what about woodpeckers? Why don't we cringe when they beat their beaks against trees repeatedly with a mighty force?
Because that's just how woodpeckers evolved. We already understand this just fine. Woodpeckers have very thick skulls and powerful muscles that keep them from scrambling their brains. This is nothing all that surprising, except for those who are desperately looking for other explanations. And this is why people like Eric just don't impress me at all. They're willing to ignore science because science doesn't stroke their pathetic little egos. That's all any of this is about, after all. Ego, feelings, emotions, that's all Eric cares about. They have wrapped their tiny little brains around this God idea, and they're absolutely incapable of letting it go. They just want it to be true, so they can only see reality through their rose-colored religious goggles that they've had surgically implanted onto their faces. And then they pretend that there's something wrong with us because we insist on looking at the world as it actually is. Yeah, tell us another one.
Because they were specially designed to take such a beating. So powerful are the woodpecker's strikes that some researchers believe that they close their eyes in between each peck to keep their eyeballs from literally popping out of their sockets as they strike the tree with such tremendous force.
Well, that's not exactly the case. Woodpeckers have special nictating membranes over their eyes that do close, as well as parts of their eyelids that swell up with blood, but mostly it isn't a big deal because they have a spongy elastic membrane that sits between the bill and the skull that serves as a cushion and keeps the brain mostly immobile. They really aren't doing anything that amazing when you actually understand all the moving parts. It's one more example of how evolution has shaped various species to take advantage of their specific ecological niche. This is something that Eric clearly has no clue about, nor, as we all know, does he care. Because Eric is a dumbass.
How can woodpeckers do this? How can they survive such headbanging? How do their craniums not crack and their brains not burst?
I already explained that. Of course, Eric won't get it, so he'll just seek out a more theologically satisfying explanation, but that's entirely unnecessary. We know how it happens. We can track the evolution of the developments, and we don't need to pretend that his magical man in the sky did it to find out the truth. Then again, science cares about the truth, and Eric, we all know, he simply does not. He wants his ego stroked, and to do that, he wants to believe that he has an imaginary friend in the sky watching over everything that he does. And unfortunately for the religious, they're probably doing a lot of things in private that they don't want God to look at, but we'll get away from that. Therefore, he just ignores reality and goes off with his absurd religious fantasy. It is really why I dislike Eric Lyons so much. And he's not alone in that, because Eric Lyons, he's not really even trying. Well, I mean, he is trying, very trying, but, you get the picture.
First, woodpeckers have extremely strong and extra thick skulls, which can take a pounding without cracking. Second, the beaks of woodpeckers are so strong they can remain perfectly straight and functional for more than 10 years and through more than 10 million pecks against trees. They don't have to be replaced or sharpened. Third, and perhaps most important, woodpeckers have special cartilage, shock absorbers, that are better than anything man has ever made.
Yeah, not so much. I mean, he was doing fine up until then, but we have shock absorbing materials that are far superior to woodpeckers in pretty much every conceivable way. You know what none of these facts actually require? The existence of a god. All of it is biology, not theology. Eric just doesn't care, which we all know. Woodpeckers are trying to get at grubs and termites and other animals that live beneath the tree's bark, and they also go down on the ground to eat ants and other more easy to get insects if they are available. So, where is God in all of this? Prove God's existence. Prove that God was necessary. You can't do that, and hell if I know where they get the idea. Oh yeah, it's all in Eric's imagination.
Better than the best car bumper and better than any shock-absorbing football helmet. In the perfect place, right in between the bird's beak and skull, God created the perfect sponge-like tissue to absorb the perpetual pounding that this bird puts itself through on a daily basis.
Yeah? Okay, prove it. Because this is where the rubber hits the road, and theists always run into problems. They're just making bald assertions that God did it. Really? Prove it. Of course, they can't because they don't care. It's just part of their emotionally comforting theology, and therefore, according to them anyhow, it just has to be true. Well, too bad reality doesn't work that way. You can't just assert an explanation and demand that everyone has to take you seriously. You have to actually show that your explanation is objectively the case, and these people can't do that. You have to be able to draw a direct causal link between your claimed cause, and be able to prove that cause actually exists, and the event in question, and the religious are really, really, really bad at that. As I keep saying, they don't even try. That would require that they be able to produce objectively verifiable evidence that their deity actually exists in the real world. And yeah, good luck on that. So instead, they just keep making fools of themselves, and Eric here is one of the top fools on the religious side.
If evolution is true, why did woodpeckers ever start banging their beaks on trees for food when they could simply gather food on the ground like most other birds?
To take advantage of a food source that other birds do not have access to. As I said, when they can get it, they'll be on the ground scooping up ants and grubs and other things because it's easier. But there are a lot of insects that you just can't get that way, which is why woodpeckers and other animals for that matter developed the evolutionary adaptations that they did. It was an additional food source that would get them through the fallow times when birds that couldn't make it on just ants and grubs and whatever on the ground, they would either die off or have to go elsewhere, and the woodpeckers would survive. This is how reality works, Eric. Maybe you ought to give it a shot.
And who taught them to communicate with each other by banging their bills against trees? Imagine the conversation the first woodpecker must have had with itself. I know other birds communicate by making sounds or by moving their feathers in certain ways, but I think I want to communicate with my family by forcefully and repeatedly striking my head against very hard surfaces.
Mostly, they do it as a mating ritual which demonstrates to prospective mates that they have the ability to provide and are healthy. You know, all the things that evolution favors. It's not like they're just up there tapping out Morse code, which, really, I wouldn't be that surprised if Eric actually thought that's what was going on. They're using the abilities that they evolved with to perform standard tasks. Why is it that this is so hard for Eric to get? Alright, because Eric is an idiot.
How did the first woodpecker not kill itself the first time it began beating its beak against a tree?
Because that's not what it did. Eric doesn't understand small changes over a long period of time. He thinks that woodpeckers just appeared fully formed in a single generation by magic. Like I said, Eric is a complete idiot. We know an awful lot about the evolution of birds, not just woodpeckers, but all of them. It's why people like Eric ought to be embarrassed, because clearly he knows absolutely nothing. And for some reason, he's proud of that. He's just trying to find things that he doesn't understand and that clearly is just about everything out there, and then just stapling "therefore God" on the end so that his fifis get coddled. I mean, how stupid is that? How stupid is Eric? You tell me.
And how did it ever get the special shock-absorbing cartilage between its beak and skull? And when did it get it? If this amazing tissue took thousands or millions of years to evolve, what did woodpeckers do in the meantime?
Early woodpecker predecessors did exactly what all the other birds did. Then some developed that had an advantage and could find food when it otherwise might not be available. Over time, they specialized in that, and as more advantages came about, they became more successful in their particular ecological niche. You know, basic evolution, Eric. Maybe you ought to figure out that there's more than one book on the planet. Get your stupid nose out of the Bible and join reality.
And why are other birds not evolving these same abilities like the woodpecker supposedly did?
Because they specialized in their own way. There is no single path to success. There is also no single path to righteousness, or whatever the fuck you believe in. There are many ways to gather food, and the most successful methods won out over the lesser successful. Welcome to Evolution 101, jackass. Geez, you are a complete moron. You really need to grow the fuck up.
Because woodpeckers didn't evolve. This amazing bird did not have to knock itself silly for millions of years in hopes of one day getting everything it needed to do what it does. Complex functional design demands a designer.
And there he goes again. Like I said, moron. He just ignores the actual explanation in favor of going after his imaginary friend and his fifis. He isn't really concerned about what actually happened, what we can prove through objective evidence happened in the real world. He just wants to fap off to his magical father figure in the sky and pretend that explains everything, even though it actually explains absolutely nothing. And this is really why people like to go after Eric and his stupidity regularly, because he's so absurdly easy to disprove. This guy is a complete joke. It's why I really don't enjoy going after his videos that often. It's no surprise that he's not bright enough to see what a complete dumbass he is, because he's got his nose in a book of mythology.
And the woodpecker, with its strong, sturdy beak, thick skull, and remarkable shock absorber, the best on the planet, testifies to the existence of the grand designer, God.
Not remotely true. But of course, this is exactly why people like Eric are such a laughingstock, because they have no actual information. They just have bald assertions that they have no way of backing up. They really wish it was true, and therefore they just close their eyes and stuff their fingers in their ears, and they scream, "La la 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 la, I can't hear you," when reality comes to call. Because this is not how bright people operate. This is not how rational people operate. They don't begin with an emotionally comforting conclusion and then just cherry pick the data to make it look like they had a reasonable explanation all along. They start with the data, all of the data, and then they follow where it leads, regardless of where they might wind up. Reality doesn't depend on your feelings, stupid. In fact, your feelings really don't mean a damn thing. It depends on what is objectively true, and whether people like Eric like that or not, his beliefs do not match up with objectively demonstrable reality. What he wants to be true isn't indicative of what is actually true. Maybe he should get that through his thick skull. You know, the thing that isn't protecting his brain from all the stupidity. I wouldn't be holding my breath, but, it's a nice thought. Anyhow, I'd like to thank My Bad for suggesting this video, even though I will admit it was rather painful to get through. Anybody else who would like to suggest a specific video, by all means, send it my way. I do have a couple of more on the list, and those will be coming up sooner or later. It'll probably take me a while to get to it. After all, I'm about 8 weeks ahead in recording and another 3 to 4 weeks ahead in writing, so anything I do, it's going to take a long time for it to show up, but hey, that's just reality. Get that faith out of your head, deal with the facts. If you'd like to see any of it faster, though, you can run over to Patreon and sign up at the $10 tier or above, and you can see every single one of my videos at least 2 months ahead of everyone else. Plus, it really does help the channel, so if you can spare it, then by all means consider backing me. I'd really appreciate it. So this is where we're going to leave Eric behind once again, and honestly, I'm not going to miss him a bit. I really don't know that anybody else will either because Eric is a dumbass. Let me know if you're going to miss him, though, in the comments. Hey, I'm open to anything. Let's have a talk.